Hey there, Amanda from the Happy Homestead. I was about to get some apples processed today and I thought I'll take you along for the ride. I hadn't planned on doing this, but I thought this actually might help you and be beneficial. So I have a lot of apples here. About 4 weeks ago, so just so you know, I've been storing these in the fridge for 4 weeks because 4 weeks ago we got an Azure drop, and you can see that video up above where we got 40 pounds of apples, 40 pounds of cabbage, all kinds of good stuff. So I'm down to about 19 pounds of apples left. We've been fresh eating. I've made apple butter. We've been using them in salads and just cooking and stuffing from Thanksgiving. But now I've got to get these processed. So last year I made apple pie filling. You can make apple pie filling. It is in, the recipe rather, is in The Complete Book of Home Preserving by Ball. And I think it's on page 170. So that's what I did last year. And in that recipe is sliced, quartered, peeled apples, nutmeg, cinnamon, a little bit lemon juice, obviously some sugar, and it's clear gel is the thickener. If you're not familiar with clear gel, it's basically, I think, a cornstarch. And so I had to, when I did this last year, it was the first time I did it. And if you've never worked with clear gel, this is something you need to take into account and listen to. It expands like crazy. And so even though, my quart jars are back behind me, but even though I did a quart jar and I filled it to the head space in the recipe, it overflowed within my canning process. Now, I was very determined. I'm a little stubborn at times. I had to can those jars. I had to process those jars 3 times because they kept expanding. I kept taking it out and it just kept expanding. So this year, I'm trying something different, and I've seen other people do this with success. So, same book, but page 1. Everything's okay. Page 144 is apples in syrup. And so it's basically the same type of thing, right? It's the apples that are peeled, quartered, sliced, and they are in a light syrup. I'm going to be doing a light syrup today. I'm still going to add my cinnamon. I'm still going to add my nutmeg. And then when it's time for me to want to make an apple pie, I will just add the clear gel at that time before I put it into the pie shell. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'm doing it a little bit differently than I did last year because I think it's going to yield better success, less frustration, less cleanup. And I wanted to impart that knowledge and that tip on you. And so let's see how it goes. So I got to get these going. The first thing I need to do is get my light syrup made. And again, in the book, it will give you a recommendation for the types of syrup. You can do ultra light, extra light, light, medium, heavy, corn syrup, and then honey. I'm doing a light syrup. And so it's 2 1/4 cups of sugar to 5 1/4 cups of water. I already have my water in my pot. I'm going to add my sugar and get that on the stove. So while the syrup is on the stove, right, we need to get that sugar dissolved. We need to get it incorporated with the water and really create a good syrup. We're going to get our apples done. So I need to core, slice, and peel all of these apples. And then the slices, I'm going to just put in a big bowl with some water and lemon juice to keep them from browning until I am ready with the syrup, and then I throw them in with the syrup. I am using this little thing, this gadget. It's really cool. I'm sure you've seen them before. Maybe you haven't. They've been around for a while. I've had this one for probably close to 15 years, honestly. So what you do is it suctions to your counter. You put your apple here on the prongs. Now, this is going to be tedious because I've got a lot of very small apples. So I'm going to do the best I can with peeling them. I am not going to be meticulous. but we're gonna do what we can. And then you start kind of rotating this around. It finally gets to the end there. And then it pushes the apple through here, which cores it. And then I can put this up, and this actually peels it. So you'll see it in action. This is what I'm going to use. Do what works best for you. But it's important that you peel the apples, because that's where the botulism spores can live on vegetables, right? So you potatoes, carrots, beets, especially anything that's coming from the ground. You're always peeling that before you're canning it. It's important that with apples as well. But again, do what works for you. I am not going to be meticulous to get every last peel off. I'm going to do my best and making sure that I'm still giving and serving my family a safe product. Okay, so I'm gonna section this down. Start with my first apple. Now the recipe calls for 10 to 12 pounds. And so I have about 19 pounds. And so the rest of the apples, I'm going to process all of them, but the rest of them I am going to dehydrate into apple chips. And so this is how it comes out. And so you can see it's gotten some of the peel, not all of the peel, but that is because my apples are pretty tiny. So I'm just going to break this up and put it in here. I've got water, a little warm water in there, and I'm going to do a splash of lemon juice, just to keep everything from browning while I'm going through this process. This could be a good activity with the kids if you wanted to, as far as like helping them peel or chop. And then with all of the apple cores, stay tuned at the end. I'm going to show you how to use the cores to make your own apple vinegar infusion. So I am just going to be here getting through all of these apples, and I will come back when everything's done. So I'm about 8 pounds in. My bowl is pretty full. I'm gonna go ahead and add them. My syrup is ready. The sugar's been dissolved. I'm gonna go ahead and add this to the pot, because what I don't wanna do is overload my pot. I wanna see how much I can get in right now with the sugar syrup, because I need to make sure that the ratio is still really good. So let's go put our cinnamon and nutmeg in the syrup and then add our apples. So I'm gonna add a tablespoon of ground cinnamon. Remember, this makes 4 quart-sized jars. My nutmeg rather, I don't have it already ground. I have it in the entire pod here, which by the way, if you haven't bought nutmeg before like this in the pod, try it. And then I use a microplane grater. It creates the best flavor. Ground nutmeg that's already been ground in a grocery store that you purchase has nothing on the fresh stuff. Okay, that was about a half a tablespoon. And then this lasts so much longer in the whole form rather than already pre-ground. All right, let's add some apples in. I don't want to add, see I have my lemon water in here. I don't want to add the lemon water, so I'm really trying to scoop the apples out with my hands. Like I said, it was about 8 pounds of apples. So now what we need to do is coat all of the apples with the syrup. But we have to bring this to a boil. I'm going to get everything to a boil and see if I need to add more syrup. So, burner's turned up, and let's wait for it to boil. So it's warming up, and I wanted to give full disclosure here. I added 1 more cup of sugar, and that's because I didn't see that my syrup level was really high enough. And so I looked in the book, right? Well, in the book it says for best results, preserve them in either a light or medium. And I was doing a light. I decided to go to a medium, and it was only 1 more cup of sugar, just about the same water ratio. So I added 1 more cup of sugar, and I actually think that made a huge difference here. You can see the level is much better. I also just sprinkled a little more cinnamon and nutmeg in. But everything is getting hot. We're not at a boil yet, but we are getting nice and warm. In the meantime, I've got my steam canner here getting warmed up with my jars inside. You always want to make sure that with hot liquid contents or hot contents going in any canning jar, that your jars are warm as well, so you don't have any thermal shock and cracked jars. All right, I'm going to start filling the jars. So, like I said, the recipe makes 4 quarts. I might have more than 4 quarts here. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm thinking, just from my experience from last year, about 1 quart and a pint make a really good pie, like decent sized pie with enough filling in it. So I am actually going to jar up 1 pint and 1 quart together, right? Rather than go quart, quart, quart. I'm going to do 1 pint next, and that way I know how many pies I can make. And I'm just making sure I've got enough liquid here to cover everything. Because when you're processing, when you're steam canning or water bath canning, the liquid, the hot liquid, is what's circulating around your solids, to making sure that you're getting up to that proper safe temperature. So you always want to make sure you have enough liquid. That's probably too much. Okay, I'm going to wipe my rims. And with this recipe, it doesn't matter if you're doing pints or quarts. The processing time is the same. It's 20 minutes. Okay, steam canner's full. We're going to get this up to the correct pressure and start our processing time at 20 minutes. So the steam canner is up to pressure. I've started my timer for 20 minutes. Now, if you're unfamiliar with steam canning, click above and I'll show you a link, a tutorial of how to use a steam canner. It's essentially the same thing as water bath canning and just a different method. If you would prefer to water bath, the traditional water bath, click that link and I'll teach you how to water bath can all of your acidic foods. So I wanted to show you the clear gel. That's the name of it, the brand. It's literally called Clear Gel. I bought this, I think it was either last year or the year before. It has a pretty long shelf life. It's good until next summer, so about 7 more months. And it is a modified cornstarch. That's what the ingredient says. It is a non-GMO product, if that matters to you. So it's basically, if you're not familiar with cornstarch, it's just a powder. And so within the recipe, when I'm ready to make a pie, I'm going to take, and by the way, if you saw, I had 3 quarts and 4 pints. So I'm really excited about that because that means I have 3 quarts and 3 pints to each make 3 pies, right? Because I'm going to do a quart and a pint per 1 pie shell. And so that's 3 pies, and then I have 1 pint left over, ice cream, snack, pancakes, whatever, that we'll have, right? So when I'm ready to go ahead and make a pie, I'm going to dump a pint and a quart in a saucepan, and I'm going to add some clear gel. I'm going to start with like 2 tablespoons probably and start mixing and boiling and going from there. If you've had an apple pie, if you ever had an apple pie, you've had apple pie. That's a silly thing to say. Who hasn't? You know, the inside, it's like that gooey, thick kind of gel, right? That's what this does. So the sugar syrup that we did, this clear gel will thicken it up. And so I will start, like I said, with 2 tablespoons probably, and just really mix it in, really stir it in. You want to get everything hot and kind of bubbly, not necessarily a roaring boil, but hot and bubbly, and then it will start to thicken up. And so judge from your own experience, your own taste, your own preferences, how thick you want it. And then I'll pour it in my pie shell. I'll probably let it cool a little bit and then put it in the pie shell and bake it in the oven. So that's the plan. Now, I've got probably 18 more minutes here on that. While that's going, I'm going to start slicing and coring the rest of these apples to go in the dehydrator for apple chips. All the apples are done, yay! So these are the ones that are going to get dehydrated. Just going to mix it around the lemon water a little bit. If you have a dehydrator and you've never done apple chips, really try them. I'll show you what they look like. I'm going to put them on the dehydrator trays. I'm going to start the dehydrator up, but I have some that are already done from the last time I did them, probably about 6 months ago in the spring. I'll show you what they look like. My kids love them. I love them. They are just really great snacks for school, anytime. But before I do that, I still have 8 more minutes of processing time. I wanted to show you what you can do with the cores. You can do this with the peels too, but I prefer to just do the cores. So I've got all of my apple cores saved here, right? I've got them all right here. You want to make sure that you are not saving any that have, you know, some blemishes, mold, whatever. Any that are a little bit more mealy, like if there were some apples that just didn't slice very well because they were kind of mealy and fell apart, I didn't save those cores. So you're going to take all of your cores. Again, you can do the peels. I prefer not to, and the reason is because the peels can sometimes come to the top and break the surface. You're basically fermenting this, and you never want it to break the surface of the water because that's how mold forms. So it's easier to weigh these down. Put all of your cores in a clean glass jar. I would recommend, depending on how many cores you have, you can do a couple of different quarts. You can do a half-gallon jar, or you could do a gallon jar. You are then going to fill that with clean, filtered spring or well water, just not tap water from the city, right? So either filtered spring or well water. You're going to fill it up. You're going to weigh down your cores just like any other fermentation that you do, making sure they're not breaking the surface. And I actually add a little bit of raw apple cider vinegar with the mother. This helps speed it up and get some of those really good properties in there. So when you buy apple cider vinegar with the mother, right, it's basically that bacterial yeast combination that ferments things. So you add a splash in and it just helps that process get a little bit faster. Let me show you the one that I have. So this is a gallon. I just have a piece of cloth with a rubber band on top. And I can see that, you know, we're not having any cores float to the top. I have some glass weights in here, if you can see the glass weights, holding everything down. I let this sit on the counter. This has been sitting here for probably 3 weeks. I'll let it go a couple more weeks and then I'll strain it to go into the longer ferment. You want to make sure you're checking it so you're not getting any mold or any calm yeast. Calm yeast is just sometimes like a really thin white layer. You just kind of scoop that off. That's very normal. And then once you get through the first fermentation, which is about 4 to 6 weeks, you strain out the solids and then you put it in a new jar and let it ferment even longer. So this is apple cider vinegar that I did, if you can see the date there, in January of this year, January of 2021. And so we're in December now. So this has been fermenting almost a year. The second ferment, right? The solids are already removed. And if I swirl this around, you can kind of see the mother, right? It's got some of it already in there, but it's been growing its own. And you can see the difference in the color, right? Compared to what I just showed you in the gallon, which is still practically clear. This is how it gets that beautiful dark color, by just fermenting. So this will be ready to use come January. I let it ferment for a year in the second ferment. So cover all of your apple cores with filtered or spring or well water. Add a splash of raw apple cider vinegar with the mother. Weigh down your cores, put a breathable top on, and just leave it. Check it every couple of days. Make sure nothing's growing that shouldn't be growing. And leave it for 4 to 6 weeks. After 4 to 6 weeks, strain out your solids. Keep your liquid. Put it in another jar. Same jar if you need the same amount, right? The same size large jar. Keep a breathable lid on it, breathable top, and then just let it go. And let it go for about a year. I know that sounds crazy, but you will have the most delicious homemade apple cider vinegar. Now, it's not apple cider vinegar that you would use to can, but you can cook with it and you can make salad dressings with it. You just can't can with it because you can't be guaranteed the level of acidity that you've created in your kitchen. But it is a great way to use the cores up and give you another product without any waste. Okay, so all I'm going to do is just put these on the dehydrator tray. They don't have to be, you know, perfectly spaced, and, you know, I try not to have them too much clumping and stacked. I do like to have a single layer. If you have a single layer, they will dehydrate a little bit faster and more evenly. And I usually dehydrate these overnight. I mean, there's no set time, but I'm gonna say these will probably take between 12 and 18 hours. I may flip them halfway. I mean, there is no real right or wrong way with dehydration. I have an Excalibur dehydrator. I love my Excalibur. I've had that for probably 15 or 16 years also. It is a workhorse. And I just dehydrate at around 125 to 135 degrees. And I'll check them in the morning. And if I need to flip them, I flip them. And then if they're not dry, I just keep going. It's such a great way to eat fresh fruit without having fresh fruit on hand, right? Like in the winter, it can be hard to keep fresh fruit on hand because it is more pricey in the stores because it's out of season. It's technically out of season. Or it's being shipped in from somewhere else in the country or the world, which, I don't know, is that always tastes best? Maybe, maybe not, depending upon where you live. So we like to do this because it really does give us a fresh fruit in a different form. There's no added sugars. You could sprinkle cinnamon on these. I don't even do that, but I mean, it was just water and lemon juice in here. There's no sugars added. So while I was putting the apples on the dehydrator trays, my timer went off for the steam canner. So I turned the burner off, but the steam canner is still on the stove on that burner. I haven't moved it. So you turn the burner off, let it kind of come down a little bit. You do not remove the lid right away. Wait at least 5 minutes, and then you can remove the lid. So I'll do that in a sec. In the meantime, I wanted to show you the dried apples. So this is all that is left from the last batch I did, which was, again, probably about 6 months ago. And they stayed pretty dry. They stayed really good in the jar. I mean, they might be a little pliable, but they still crack when you break them. But they're so delicious. They're chewy, they're appley, concentrated, right? The flavor is so much more concentrated. And so their natural sugars kind of shine through, which is why you don't have to add any sugars. You could add cinnamon, you could add other spices, but we just don't do so. So I'll add a handful of these into, you know, my kids' lunches or snack bags. I don't think this vessel will be big enough to tackle what's in the dehydrator, of what's gonna come out when they're done, but that's okay. It's a good problem to have, right? So these are the dehydrated apple chips. All right, it's been 5 minutes. I'm going to remove the lid. I am not gonna take the jars out yet though. So I'm going to leave everything in here for at least 5 more minutes, and then I'll take it out, put it on the counter, and let it cool for at least 24 hours. Thanks for coming along on this journey with me this morning, this impromptu journey. I'm really glad this got done. This is a job that I'm so grateful is done, right? So I got out of the 19 pounds of apples, and it took about 1 hour to process all 19 pounds. We did 4 pints of apples and syrup, and we did 3 quarts of apples and syrup, and those will make pies, really good apple pies, as well as plenty of other uses. And then we've got 4 trays of apple chips in the dehydrator that will start up as soon as I'm done filming here. I'll start the dehydrator. The dog is eating the apple box from Azure. So that's the noise you hear. He's having fun with the box. And then we've got a gallon of our homemade apple cider vinegar that is fermenting. I will post the recipe down in the show notes for the apple slices and syrup, and I'll make sure I note that I did the medium syrup rather than the light like I had originally intended to. So I hope this was helpful in showing different ways that you can use your produce to last more than just one use. See you next time. Stay healthy, stay well. Bye-bye.